When it comes to picking my favourite locomotives from Hornby, certainly the top 10, there's so many to choose from. A big hello to you, it's so great to see you and I hope I find you well. I'm Kirk and this is Weir Yard, and today I'm going to be taking a look at my top 10 favourite Hornby models in my collection. Now, as you can see behind me, there's just a smattering of my collection. There's a lot more besides hidden in drawers underneath. And it's built up over the years. I was lucky enough 25 years or so ago to have a really great job in broadcasting, which allowed me to purchase a lot of these models as they were coming out. And it's formed the nucleus of what has actually become quite a large collection. But it's the way that with everybody's collection of models, there's always going to be some that are more favorited than others. And today I thought I'd go through and pick out my top 10 favorite Hornby models of all time. So come with me in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support comes from
This is Clark Railworks and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double-O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
It has to be said that there's always going to be that model that has a special place in your collection, and no more so than in the huge amount of stuff I've got behind me and underneath the layout. And I've actually enjoyed having a good rummage through all of my stuff to pick out for you what I consider to be my top 10 favourite Hornby locomotives. Now, I had to be a little bit cruel to myself and I have not included my childhood Hornby 00 collection, but just tended to keep it to stuff that I can run up here in Weir Yard. And what could I have picked? Well, there's been so many great models from Hornby over the years, it's actually a little bit hard at times to whittle it down. But I've done that and I'm really pleased to be able to show you today my top 10 favourite Hornby models in my collection. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and you can also head on over to Patreon to help support the channel to keep making these videos that you want to see. But without further ado, let's see what I picked. When it comes to picking my favourite locomotives from Hornby, certainly the top 10, there's so many to choose from. It's actually been quite interesting whittling them down just to that top 10. And I've decided that in the number 10 position, I'm going to go for the W4 Peckett. Now, this is a locomotive that was introduced unexpectedly to Hornby's range a few years ago now, and it came out in a number of different liveries over the next couple of years. And there's a number of these which were really quite highly desirable, including the Huntley and Palmer's version, and these ran extensively on my previous model railway and featured in a number of videos. But this particular version was one of the initial 3 that were released. We got Locomotive D in the Huntley and Palmer's blue. We got a leaf green works finish one as well. And then we got this as number 11 from the Manchester Ship Canal Railway. And certainly this is a slightly more unusual version of the W4 Peckett. And it's one which it sent me scurrying away to look up details of it. And it turned out that the MSC had 3 of these W4 Pecketts, and I believe they were number 11, 12 and one in the 20s, I think, dredging my memory, possibly number 27. And it really did catch my eye because at the time my exhibition layout was based on a corner of Trafford Park, so it was a natural locomotive to pick up and to have for that layout. And certainly I'm always a sucker for locomotives in green, and this one, it just has a kind of simplicity with the more basic lining and just a number 11 on the side. And certainly in terms of weight, there's a lot of weight in here. It's a really great locomotive. And one thing which I'm guessing a lot of people maybe missed was that there's a lot of detail differences available between the different W4 packets that were released, including cab backs, the height of the chimney, the dome, and other pipework details. So I'm putting this in at number 10. In my number 9 slot, I've actually gone for the rather quite large Mikado tank that Hornby produced as a range of 3 different classes of closely related locomotives: the 42XX, 52XX and these 72XXs, which were the only Mikado, that's 282 wheel arrangement tank locomotives to run in the UK. Born out of the Great Depression, these were a rebuild from 42XX and 52XX locomotives to extend their range by increasing their bunker size, which necessitated the addition of lengthened frames and that additional trailing wheel. This particular locomotive at the time was one which really did catch my eye, and certainly it is a great performer, and in this Great Western green really does look amazing. I found it to be a pretty good performing locomotive here on Weir Yard, and I have a secret soft spot for it. Out of all of my Great Western Railway locomotives, this is the one which I find myself coming back to time and time again, and it's probably run more than all of the other Great Western Railway locomotives that I have in my fleet combined. For the number 8 locomotive, I've chosen the Hunslet Austerity, which is probably one of the older models which Hornby still have in their main range. But for me, even though these have been available since, I'm guessing, around the late 1990s, they really do hold their own. They're reliable runners, they capture the look and heft of these venerable workhorses of industry and the Second World War with great accuracy. And even though they're not offered as DCC ready from Hornby, they take literally just minutes to hardwire and are really silky smooth, reliable runners. There's been so many different liveries available over the years from the different War Department, Longmore Military Railway, NCB and other industrial plus LNER and the BR derivatives of those LNER locomotives as the J94. And for me, the one which stands out in my collection is Wimblebury in this lightly weathered guise, NCB, almost a Prussian blue, and it's the locomotive that I've picked for my number 8. In 7th place, I've gone to the Southern Railway, and one of the locomotives which I really do love are these Schools Class 440s. Hornby has had this model in various forms in their range for longer than I can remember, and it's certainly one which has been retooled time and time again. This particular example in its olive green as Cheltenham is certainly one which really does look great, and whilst I'm not a huge fan of traction tyres, the traction tyres that this locomotive is fitted with has ensured that it has been an incredible performer, able to haul some of the longest trains in my fleet. In fact, I've used it so much that the traction tyres have actually stretched and need replacing, but it's one which, even though I kind of have a no traction tyre rule, I'll always bend those rules to find a place for this locomotive in my fleet. The next locomotive that I have chosen for my number 6 slot is probably one that people might see as being just a little bit controversial because it's a somewhat unloved model. This is the Class 71, and I really do like this in the rail blue with the full yellow ends as 71012, and this is the only version that I'm aware of that Hornby produced in this rail blue tops livery. The detail on this model is great, and it has to be said that this pantograph on the roof really is quite impressive. Not all members of the class actually did receive a pantograph, and in later years some of them were removed, just leaving an empty space in the roof, and that's a version that Hornby have not produced. The front look of these has a very peculiar, almost slightly stern look to them, and is very distinctive for these southern all-electric locomotives. There's plenty of detail, including the rendition of the booster unit that can be seen through the engine room window in the centre, and certainly it is a pretty faultless performer, and I've actually gone as far as to fit this with the HM7000 decoder and power bank, and whilst a little bit fiddly, it's certainly doable and has turned this into a stalwart performer on my layout. So I'm going to be putting this in as my number 6 locomotive. The number 5 slot that I've picked is the Class 08 diesel shunter, and I am a huge fan of these Gronks. Both Class 08 and Class 09 have been offered by Hornby over the years in various different liveries. The real Class 08s really were a venerable workhorse of Britain's railways, some of the longest lasting locomotives in revenue service, and some still work on frontline freight duties to this day. The version that Hornby tooled up in their super detail range really is the best model of the 08 that's on the market today, and for me it's come out in some of my favourite liveries too, so I've got that double win-win. This particular livery, Intercity, is my favourite of them all, and as 08673 Piccadilly, this locomotive has been sound fitted and is really quite a great performer. I have a huge rake of Intercity coaches, and quite often I'll set this off trundling around Weir Yard with that huge rake in tow, which it manages without any great issue whatsoever. So I've got no hesitation to put this in as my number 5 locomotive. Number 4, I'm going to pick the Terrier. Now this is a locomotive which I always did love. Even the previous version from Hornby has one that I had a number of examples in my collection. When they retooled it, it certainly did massively improve a model which dated back to certainly the early 1990s, and this is a version that has been released in a number of different guises. Merton was done as one of the anniversary sets that Hornby did a number of years ago, and its tie to the anniversary of Hornby is that Merton is where the original factory was located, the Borough of London, and certainly Merton is not a version of the London Brighton South Coast Railway Terrier that I'm aware as having ever been released before, so it was certainly a welcome addition for modelers. They also released Brighton, Leadenhall, and of course Stepney in this livery, and certainly I am very much looking forward to future releases in this really quite eye-catching ochre livery that the Terriers first ran painted in. The model itself features a 6-pin decoder socket and is relatively easy to DCC fit, although it has escaped any sound installations because space is quite tight inside. Nonetheless, they are faultless performers, and I made it my mission to actually pick up every single version that Hornby have produced in this particular livery because it is one of my favourites. So I'm putting this in as my number 4 locomotive. For my number 3 locomotive, I've gone with Duchess of Montrose. This is a model which harks back to those days of Hornby 00, and I did, of course, have both the Duchess of Atholl and Duchess of Montrose models that were available from Hornby 00, albeit I got them second hand, but they were much loved models. So when Hornby introduced their fully super detailed version of Duchess of Montrose, I knew I had to have it, and I was not disappointed by this behemoth of a model. The LMS Princess Coronations were some of the largest express locomotives to run on Britain's railways, and certainly this has an incredible presence to it. I may be a self-confessed lover of all things linear, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room in my collection for these Princess Coronation locomotives, and Duchess of Montrose, harking back to those childhood locomotive fleet days, really is the perfect model that Hornby could have released, and I snapped it up the moment that it appeared in the shops. It's fitted with a sound decoder and can often be seen chugging around the layout up here on Monday's Monday Club live streams, and certainly she has never let me down yet, and that's why I'm perfectly happy for this to be my number 3 locomotive choice. In the number 2 slot, well, it probably comes as no surprise, as a huge fan of A4s, that these would feature very highly up my list. One of my first locomotives as a child was the Hornby 00 Silver King 60016 in BR Early Crest Green, and I fell in love with this very aesthetically pleasing class of locomotives there and then on that Christmas day in the early 1980s. Walter K. Wigham is the locomotive that was released by Hornby in this very eye-catching experimental purple livery, although it looks a little bit more like the Great Eastern Railway livery that was resplendent in pre-grouping times. I actually wasn't aware of this particular livery before I saw this locomotive model, and it prompted me to go and look up this quite unusual livery, and found that no less than 4 of the A4s did run in this livery, although Walter K. Wigham and Merlin are the only 2 that I have ever seen in model form, albeit the Merlin model was a special commission for a retailer quite some time ago. When I got back into railway modelling, it stood to reason that I was going to expand my A4 fleet, and again it's another locomotive type that I've made it my mission to get pretty much every version that has been released in super detail form, but this particular livery does remain my firm favourite of all of my A4s. When it comes to my number 1 choice, really there is only one locomotive that comes up time and time again in these lists that I occasionally produce, and it's this locomotive. Now, I do have a massive soft spot for the ex-Lancashire and Yorkshire Pugs, particularly in their BR livery, so much so that I've actually collected every single one of these that has ever been produced. And it's quite a collection of locomotives, but this one, 51222, was the very first. And when I got back into model railways after university, this was the locomotive that kicked it all off. I remember being in Bolton, and I was walking through the centre, and I passed a shop called Bolton Model Mart, and in the window this was one of the items that they had there. Now, I'd moved away from model railways. I'd gone on to do a lot of work in radio, and model railways had kind of faded somewhat. But when I saw this locomotive, it just rekindled that joy that I had had for the hobby. And I can remember the little voice in my head said, you know, you don't need to ask anybody's permission to buy that. You can just go in there and buy it. So I did just that, and I bought this locomotive and a couple of mineral wagons to go with it, and that is what kicked off everything that led eventually to Weir Yard and this YouTube channel. And I've remained with this amazing soft spot for this very locomotive ever since. As far as I'm aware, it has only ever been released once in this livery, although some of the other identities, such as 51218 and 51235, have enjoyed a number of different separate releases with the same running number, but different crests on the tank. And this one is always very, very dear to me. For that reason, I've decided that this has to be my number one Hornby locomotive. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that look through my collection, and I'm wondering, what did you think about the 10 models that I picked out as my absolute favourites? Are they ones which you would have picked, or maybe you've got a different list of models with a different list of reasons as to why they are your absolute favourites? I'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below, and it's a great way to look and see what other people are picking as well. And certainly it can be quite interesting to see which models come out time and time again on top of the pile as being firm favourites, and I'd love to see what you guys have put forward from your own collections as your top 10 favourites. But until next time, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and you can also check out our full merch store just underneath the video down there. But until next time, you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com, and don't miss out on your latest loco.
I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.